There was nothing left of us after the war. We had once been splendid. For 1,000,000 years, we thrived in peace and prosperity. Even the most advanced civilizations envied us. Our technology, our society, our culture, this defined the Ithara. Generations lived without knowing pain, fear, or loss. We engraved our emblem on everything we exported across the cosmos. Our likeness, a symbol of excellence, was a sleek, elongated form with dual tails and a long head adorned with manipulative appendages. We believed that our emblem, a testament to the quality of our products, would earn us respect among those we traded with. Instead, it incited envy and greed. We were unprepared when war erupted. An alliance of species, Kantari, Exilvians, and Tukriyans, swept through our systems like a wildfire through a forest. Our homeworld was flattened to its bedrock. 1,000,000 years of glorious history were erased from time's memory, and all we could do was watch in horror or turn away. Most of our colonies were annihilated, save for a few small ones overlooked by the invasion fleets. Even those were eventually devoured by our enemies once they divided the spoils. Everything we had became theirs. When the guns finally fell silent, we opened our eyes to find nothing left of us. Our civilization and its marvels were gone, reduced to a mere footnote in the archives of other species. A handful of Ithara survivors took the last remaining ships and fled. We became a ragtag flotilla, itinerant traders scraping by, selling the remnants of our lives to whoever would buy them. Our emblem was meticulously erased for safety and because we were now nobodies. Fittingly, we had no friends left. All the species we had enjoyed good relations with, even those we had considered friends for eons, refused to take us in, fearing retaliation from our enemies. We were not the only species that had grown decadent and complacent. We were forced into a nomadic existence, drifting from star to star, finding brief respites before moving on again. Eventually, we reached a dazzling blue jewel of a world on the outskirts of a distant spiral arm. The natives had countless names for it, but settled on one for us to use, Terra. To our surprise, they welcomed us. We had little to offer, just remnants and memories of better times. Yet they let us stay for reasons we couldn't fathom. We thought we had finally come far enough, that our enemies would leave us alone, and that we might have found a new home. The natives of Terra, those awkward, ungainly Terrans, were a primitive species. They had barely ventured beyond their own solar system, and many still lived much as they had before leaving their planet. Before our downfall, we would have pitied them. But now, we pitied only ourselves. Compared to our rapidly decaying ships, Terra was an oasis of civilization. However, that didn't mean there wasn't room for improvement. The Terrans accepted our modest gifts and, in return, gave us parts of their oceans and a few islands adequate for our needs. We were few, and they were a land-dwelling species anyway. They expected nothing from us and seemed content to leave us to our own devices. But we intended to repay our hosts. If we no longer had material possessions to offer, we at least had knowledge. The Terrans and Ithara prospered together. They were eager to learn, and we were eager to teach. They lacked the millennia of experience we had, but they possessed ingenuity and determination. Within a few decades, the Terrans had advanced considerably, if not as much as other species, then at least not completely backward anymore. Their rapid transformation startled us as they took advanced concepts and reshaped them into usable forms. Soon, we were running out of things to teach them. Then the good times ended again. Even so far away and so diminished, they couldn't let us rest. All we wanted was peace, but they feared we would rebuild and reclaim what had once been ours. An embassy arrived from our old enemies, the Kantari. Their message was simple: hand over the Ithara you have unwisely sheltered, or be annihilated with them. Deep down, we had always known this day might come, and we had kept our ships space-worthy just in case. With heavy hearts, we prepared to leave. Then the Terrans surprised us again. They said no. I heard the Kantari ambassador asked 3 times if there had been a translation error. Finally, a Terran negotiator clarified their response unmistakably. You come to our planet hunting refugees who pose no threat to you. You threaten us in our own home. You demand we betray our friends and expect us to cower before you. Our answer is no. We will do none of that. The Kantari ambassador was understandably perplexed. He reminded them that the Kantari had many more warships than the Terrans. This did not have the desired effect. The Terrans simply told the ambassador that if he wanted that to remain true, his people should keep their ships far from Terra. Retaliation was slow in coming. Terra was well beyond the fringes of civilized space, and the Kantari had brought only a token force to back up their threat. They assumed the mere existence of their great fleets would ensure compliance. And when that failed, it took a long time to gather the necessary forces and traverse the vast distances. But it did. The grand fleet of the Triple Concord, Kantari, Exilvian, and Tukryan ships, just as it had been at the end of our world. However, the Kantari ambassador failed to consider a small yet crucial difference in Terran psychology. Most species, when threatened, estimate the cost of fighting versus complying with their enemy's demands and choose the lesser evil. Terrans, however, estimate the maximum force they can bring to bear, the maximum force their enemy can field, and keep fighting regardless of the cost, as long as the former is greater, equal, or not too much smaller than the latter. In other words, they are prepared to make sacrifices if there is even a remote possibility of victory. Other species are not like that. After reaching a certain level of civilization, sacrifices no longer seem worth it. But Terrans are new to civilization as we understand it. Their lives are built on sacrifices. This is not to say they don't care. They care deeply. But for the Triple Concord, killing them didn't make them back down. It only made them angrier. The first fleet engagements occurred near Lyra. Terra's ships ambushed a forward element of the Concord fleet, scoring a few kills before reinforcements arrived. Terra's fleet then engaged in a pitched battle against an allied attack squadron, taking 90% casualties. It was a complete rout, forcing all Terran ships out of Lyra. Several colonies were evacuated just before being destroyed. After the battle, the Exilvians sent an embassy to Terra to negotiate terms of surrender. The Terrans were baffled. We've only had one battle, they said. Who ends a war after just one battle? Most species, actually, but I didn't tell them that. The Exilvians assumed humanity had simply doubted their fleet's capabilities, and now, having demonstrated their superiority, the Terrans would back down to avoid further losses. That is how most species would respond. The Exilvians were disappointed, for the Terrans, being Terrans, only got angrier. Remember, Lyra became a rallying cry for the rest of the war, an incomprehensible notion to most species, because why remember your defeat? But for Terrans, it worked. The war was much longer than the Triple Concord expected. Their initial forays towards Terra encountered systems bristling with fixed defenses. Their fleets were stronger, but thanks to their overconfidence, humanity had had ample time to prepare. System by system, they were worn down, so they attempted a direct strike at Terra. This was an even worse idea. Terra was the most heavily defended planet, and even the combined might of the Concord fleet was forced to retreat after inconclusive skirmishes. They switched tactics, attacking the least defended systems to lure the Terrans into another pitched battle they would likely lose. The Terrans didn't fall for the bait, letting their colonies fall while launching hit-and-run attacks, nipping at larger forces to disorganize them, ambushing smaller ones and destroying them. I say Terrans, but they were not entirely alone. I and some other Ithara fought with them. For the first time, mostly, our attempts to defend our homes had been utterly futile, and most who tried to fight rather than flee had perished. We were new to warfare, but had good teachers. Now our roles were reversed. The Terrans had vast experience in something they could teach us. It was knowledge we never desired, but we utilized it as best we could. The Triple Concord began to falter. They were at the end of a galaxy-spanning supply chain, and the war of attrition was unfavorable. Casualties were horrific for the Terrans, but they were also higher than the Kantari, Exilvians, or Tukriyans expected, and they were unaccustomed to making sacrifices. The Tukriyan contingent consolidated their forces to guard against further attacks, limiting their effectiveness and angering their allies. The carnage continued, but a stalemate, at best, was becoming evident. The Terrans might even be winning, and that was enough to doom the Concord. Terrans had their own friends as well. Besides us, they enjoyed good relations with other species in this corner of the galaxy, and had been lobbying them to join the war on their side. Faced with the Concord fleet's juggernaut, all neighboring species declined aid. But once that juggernaut started showing cracks, the war severely disrupted trade in this galaxy sector. Many species noted the brutality with which the Concord obliterated human colonies. Terra's neighbors assessed the situation rationally and judged that it would benefit them if the Concord was emphatically encouraged to return to their side of the galaxy. When the odds were favorable, probing attacks on Concord detachments began. An Alliance logistics squadron was cornered and defeated, costing the attackers almost nothing and the defenders almost everything. Once this occurred, the Tukriyan fleet withdrew entirely, followed by the Exilvians, and finally the Kantari remnants. Their entire war effort collapsed so quickly, it was almost anticlimactic, barely giving the Terrans time to hunt down a rearguard squadron and have their awaited final showdown. Climactic battle shattered the enemy forces for good. Just as we had decades earlier, the battered ships of the Triple Concord limped across the galaxy's far reaches, seeking safety. They reached their homes, but those homes were surrounded by species they had bullied when their fleet was unchallengeable. The Terrans had warned them, if you want to keep your ships, don't bring them near Terra. They really should have listened. Victory was bittersweet with so many dead, but having never experienced it before, I understood why the Terrans savored it. It was certainly better than defeat. To my surprise, the war ended, and this time, something remained. Our new home, Terra. That should be the end of my tale, but after the war, I asked the Terran, why? Why go through all this for us? Because it always seemed like madness to me. He told me, first, because you're our guests and our friends, and we owed you better than to just hand you over. But also, because you don't deal with bullies by giving them what they want. They'll only demand more and more until, by the time you must fight, you have nothing left to fight with. That lesson has been learned the hard way more than once in our history. I sat, listening, and my mind spun as I realized I was only beginning to understand the young species I had looked down on since they first gave us sanctuary. So heed my words. There's logic in their madness. They are less than sane, but more than savage. While they balance in between, more is within their reach than for those on either side. Do not underestimate them because we are old and they are young. We have 1,000,000 years of greatness behind us, but they may have 1,000,000 years of greatness yet to come.